My daughter-in-law accidentally handed me my son's lunchbox, and what I found inside truly shook me to my core. It wasn't just some harmless mix-up, you see. It was the first shot fired in an all-out war, right in the heart of my own family. My name is Judith Hayes. I'm 72, from Boston, and I spent my whole life building an empire from scratch. But this is the story of how an old mother had to become a ruthless strategist to protect the only thing that ever truly mattered. So, pull up a chair and join me for this high-stakes chess match, and you'll see just how steep the price of perfection can be. At 72 years old, I've learned that life rarely hands you absolute perfection. It usually just gives us the next best thing, a polished outer shell with countless hidden cracks underneath that no one ever sees. I built an entire empire, Hayes Botanicals, with my own 2 hands and a broken heart after my husband passed. I know all about the price of having to appear strong, but the perfection that my daughter-in-law Amber displayed, that had a different feel to it. It was crystal clear, sparkling, and terrifyingly cold. It all started on a typical Monday morning in October, here in Boston. The crisp air was sneaking through the window frames of our old brownstone in Beacon Hill. The smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the scent of lilies Amber had just arranged in a crystal vase on the dining table. She was always like that, attentive to the smallest detail. Her blonde hair was in a perfect bun, her white silk apron was without a single wrinkle, and her smile was as radiant as if it were tailor-made for a magazine cover. My son, Michael, was fixing his tie. At 40, he still had a youthful look, but his eyes held the maturity of a successful investor. He is my everything, my pride, my reason for getting up every morning. Watching the way Amber tenderly brushed an invisible speck of dust from her husband's shoulder, I used to think I was the luckiest mother-in-law in the world. "Here's your lunch, Michael," Amber said, her voice as sweet as honey. "And yours too, Mom. You shouldn't eat out anymore. It's not good for your health." She handed Michael a large lunchbox and a smaller one to me. I smiled and took it, feeling a false warmth in my chest. Perfection, I've learned, often comes at the highest price. I just never imagined that price could be my own son's life. That afternoon at the Hayes Botanicals office, I opened my bag and let out a little laugh. Amber had mixed them up. In my hands was Michael's large lunchbox. I shook my head, thinking she must have just been busy and had a forgetful moment. A few of my younger employees gathered around my desk, teasing me about how well my daughter-in-law looked after me. "Wow, the boss is getting the royal treatment," one young woman said. "Let's see what amazing meal Michael's getting today." I opened the lid. The rich aroma of beef stew wafted out, but something made me pause. On the plastic rim of the container, there were a few tiny white crystals, as fine as sugar, glinting under the fluorescent lights. I frowned and ran my finger through them. It didn't taste like anything in particular. "That's odd," I mumbled. "Sugar on the rim of a savory dish." The office erupted in laughter. "Looks like the salt on a margarita glass, boss." I laughed along with them, but a vague sense of unease began to creep into my mind. I decided to take the container to Walter's old lab. Walter, my 75-year-old confidant, was a brilliant pharmaceutical chemist before he retired. He still came by the company to advise the younger folks. There was no one I trusted more. "Walter, take a look at this. Isn't this funny?" I said, keeping my tone light. "My daughter-in-law must think Michael's working so hard he needs an extra dose of sugar." Walter didn't laugh. He put on his reading glasses, took the container, and turned it under the light. His cheerful expression slowly faded, replaced by intense focus. He carefully used a pair of tweezers to pick up a single crystal, placed it on a small glass slide, and observed it. His silence extinguished the laughter inside me. "Judith," he said, his voice unusually low and serious, "this lunchbox, don't eat it, and don't let anyone else eat it either." "What's wrong?" I asked, worried now. "It's just a little sugar." "I'm not sure it is sugar," Walter replied, his eyes still glued to the crystal. "And I don't like things I'm not sure about. Judith, with our experience in this industry, you know as well as I do that any unidentified crystal on a food item is a red flag, the highest level. Listen to me. Take this to a reputable private lab right now. Don't wait. His words were like a splash of cold water to the face. The humor vanished, replaced by a fear that was just beginning to take root. I looked at my old friend, a man I knew would never joke about something like this. I nodded, my hand holding the lunchbox suddenly trembling. On the way to the lab, the entire world seemed to move in slow, silent motion. The traffic, the people talking and laughing on the street, it all felt distant. The only thing in my mind was the image of those tiny white crystals. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting, that it was all just some silly mistake. But a mother's intuition, the same gut feeling that had saved me from bad business deals time and time again, was screaming that something was terribly wrong. I sat in the waiting room, my hands clasped together so tightly my knuckles were white. An hour felt like a century. Finally, a woman in a white lab coat came out, holding a file. She looked at me with a pained expression. "Mrs. Hayes," she said gently, "we have the results. The crystalline compound in your sample is arsenic." Arsenic. The word echoed in my head like a thunderclap. The world around me spun. My ears were ringing. Arsenic. Poison. I stared at the technician, my mouth open but no words coming out. Everything shattered. The scattered pieces of a puzzle suddenly snapped together into a horrifying picture. Michael's sudden stomach pains he always blamed on stress. The evenings he was so tired he'd just fall asleep on the sofa. The pale, sallow look his skin had taken on lately. "No, it can't be," I whispered, but I didn't even believe the words myself. I left the lab like a sleepwalker. I didn't cry. The shock and fear were so immense they had frozen my tears. All that was left inside me was a burning rage and a cold, hard resolve. I would not confront Amber, not yet. That snake was too clever. One wrong move would tip her off, and Michael would be in even greater danger. The first thing I did was call Michael. I arranged to meet him at his private office, a glass skyscraper in the financial district. I couldn't have this conversation over the phone. Michael greeted me with his usual smile, but it vanished the moment he saw my face. "Mom, what's wrong? You look terrible." I shut the door firmly behind me. Without a word of greeting, I placed the lab report on his desk. "Read it, Michael." He picked it up, his brow furrowed in confusion. I saw the exact moment his eyes landed on the word arsenic. His face went pale, and the paper in his hand began to tremble. What is this?" He looked up at me, his eyes filled with disbelief. "Is this some kind of joke?" I told him everything, from the switched lunchbox and Walter's warning to the lab results. I forced my voice to remain calm and steady, as if I were presenting a business plan, because I knew if I showed any weakness, my son would fall apart. "Mom, what are you saying?" Michael shot up from his chair, his voice cracking. "Amber loves me. She takes care of my every need. You think she wants to kill me? That's insane." "Then how do you explain your stomach pains for the last 6 months?" I shot back, my voice sharp as glass. "The unexplained fatigue, the weight you've lost. Michael, you have to face the facts." My son paced the room, running his hands through his hair in distress. I could see the war in his eyes, caught between his love for his wife and the undeniable proof in front of him. He's a smart man, but he was also a man in love. "Why?" he whispered, his voice broken. "Why would she do this?" "My will," I answered curtly, "and all of your assets. If something were to happen to you, she would be the primary beneficiary." After a long silence, Michael lifted his head. The pain in his eyes was gone, replaced by a hardened look I rarely saw. But he asked a question that gave me pause. Are you sure, Mom? All we have is one piece of paper from a lab. If this is some kind of horrible mistake, or if there's a third party involved, we could be destroying our family for nothing. I understand your doubt, Michael, I said, softening my tone. I want to believe this is just a nightmare too, but we cannot gamble with your life. So here's what we'll do. I'm hiring a private investigator. You will continue to be the loving husband, but you will watch. You will look for the truth with your own eyes. I will not make a move without your absolute agreement. He gave a heavy nod. I knew from that moment on, I wasn't just fighting Amber. I was also fighting against the love and trust my son still had for her. That very afternoon, I called Mr. Davies, the best PI I knew, a man who had helped me with a few corporate messes in the past. My request was clear. Dig into every corner of Amber's life. I needed to know everything. A week later, Mr. Davies sent me a sealed file. I read it in my office in the middle of the night when the entire city was asleep. The more I read, the colder I felt. He had uncovered 2 deadly secrets. First, Amber was in significant debt from cryptocurrency gambling and was being pressured by some unsavory characters to pay up. This confirmed my initial suspicions about her motive being financial. Second, and this is what sent a chill down my spine, Amber's mother had a history of long-term treatment in a psychiatric facility for Huntington's disease, a genetic, degenerative neurological disorder with no cure, with early symptoms including memory loss and personality changes. It was a fear, a weakness that Amber had fought to keep hidden at all costs. I closed the file. I had my ammunition. A plan began to form in my mind. I presented everything to Michael. When he heard about Amber's debts, he was silent. But when I mentioned his mother-in-law's illness, he let out a long, bitter sigh. She never told me about that. That concealment, combined with the financial motive, shattered the last wall of his defense. He was completely on my side now. War doesn't always start with the sound of gunfire. Sometimes it begins with a smile, a quiet announcement over the breakfast table where the coffee is still warm and the morning sun is still dancing on the silverware. My war began just like that, a silent war fought with bank account numbers and words that planted seeds of paranoia. A week after I got the PI's report, I was ready. I sat across from Amber in the dining room, my navy blue silk dress perfectly smooth, the string of pearls at my neck casting a cold light. Michael sat beside me, his expression perfectly composed. I have something to announce to you both, I began, my voice as calm as if I were discussing the weather. I've been speaking with my lawyers and financial advisors. To optimize the estate and minimize future tax liabilities, we are going to conduct a complete restructuring of the family's assets. I looked directly at Amber. She was holding a teacup, and I saw her hand hesitate for just a fraction of a second. The smile on her face remained flawless. Of course, Mother, you always have the most foresight. Good, I said. This means that for the next 3 to 6 months, certain assets will be temporarily frozen for auditing. I'll be revoking supplementary credit cards and closing redundant joint accounts. All family expenditures will be managed directly by me through a single account. It's just a formality, you understand. I don't want any errors. I saw it then, a flicker of panic in the back of her eyes, so fast you would have missed it if you weren't looking. She was like a cornered animal, her fur still sleek, but her claws just beginning to scratch the floor. To be cut off from her money supply, to have her financial freedom revoked, for someone in debt and desperate for cash like Amber, this was the first blow. She couldn't object, because any protest would make her look like a greedy daughter-in-law. All she could do was smile and nod. Of course, whatever you do is for the good of the family. That night, when the house was silent, it was Michael's turn to play his part, a task more painful than any business deal he had ever faced. I had prepared everything, a glass vial identical to Amber's, filled with fine cornstarch. The real poison, once secured, would become our ironclad evidence against her. I sat in the living room, my heart hammering against my ribs. I had entrusted my son's safety to his own hands, to his courage to face the betrayal of the woman he slept next to every night. I heard the water start running in the upstairs bathroom. That was the signal. Upstairs, Michael made his move. He quietly opened their bedroom door, holding his breath. Amber was in the shower, the sound of the water and soft music masking any other noise. He went straight to the closet, knelt down, and searched in silence. His hand brushed past old sweaters until it touched the cold, wooden jewelry box. He opened it. The small glass vial lay there, silent and deadly. With his right hand, he took the vial of poison. With his left, from his pocket, he took out the fake vial I had prepared. A swift exchange. The fake vial was placed back in the exact same spot. The jewelry box was closed. The sweaters were replaced. The entire act took only a few seconds. When he silently closed the door and came back downstairs, his face was pale, but his eyes were more determined than ever. He said nothing, just quietly placed the vial of real arsenic on the table in front of me. A tiny container, yet it was heavy with the proof of a monstrous plot. I carefully put it away. I knew from that night on, my son wasn't just physically safe. He had personally severed the last emotional thread connecting him to Amber. He was ready for war. The psychological front was now open. A few days later, Michael began to make a miraculous recovery. His color returned, the stomach pains vanished. His appetite came back, and he even started going to the gym again. It was all thanks to the discreet meals I prepared and had delivered to his office every day. During one dinner, Michael cheerfully cut into his steak and looked at Amber with a loving gaze. "Honey, I don't know what you've been doing, but your cooking has been amazing lately. I feel full of energy. My doctor is surprised too." I glanced at Amber. She was holding her fork, but she wasn't eating. Her smile looked forced. I could see the confusion and suspicion in her eyes. What was happening? She was certain she was still putting the medicine in his food every day. Why wasn't it working? Or was the dosage not enough? An ordinary person would have been confused, would have thought their poison wasn't working. But not Amber. 2 days after Michael started looking healthy, she made her move. She cooked a delicious cream of mushroom soup for dinner. She served herself and me first, but then said to Michael, "Honey, this has a bit too much cream in it, probably not good for someone who was just sick. Let me make you a nice salmon salad instead." It was a test, an incredibly clever one. She was checking to see if Michael was deliberately avoiding food she cooked. Michael, thankfully, had anticipated this. "It's okay, sweetheart," he smiled. "I'm feeling great. I'd love to try your soup." He took the bowl and ate it naturally. Of course, that soup was perfectly safe. Amber hadn't put anything in it. But I saw her eyes narrow. She had her answer. She knew that we knew. The game had changed. It was no longer a siege. It was a direct confrontation in the shadows. She knew we were watching, and she began to fight back. Our attempts to gaslight her became useless. When I accidentally found her keys in a strange place, she would just smile. "Oh, I must be so forgetful. Thanks, Mom." She showed no panic. She was quietly observing us, logging our every move. And then she launched her first counterattack, a vicious blow aimed directly at me. One day, my housekeeper, who was actually a female detective, reported seeing Amber sneaking into my home office. When I checked, everything seemed to be in its place. But 2 days later, during a small party at the house with a few close friends, as I was opening a bottle of wine, my hand suddenly trembled and I dropped the bottle. Walter, my old friend, quickly caught it. "Judith, are you all right?" he asked, concerned. "I'm fine," I replied. Though I was surprised myself, I must just be a little tired. But it didn't stop there. A few days later, I began to feel slightly dizzy, and my memory seemed to be slipping. I almost forgot an important meeting. It was then that Michael and I realized Amber's horrific new plan. She wasn't targeting Michael anymore. She was targeting me. She had somehow retrieved the real vial of poison from where I'd hidden it, or she had a backup, I couldn't be sure, and now she was using that same weapon in minuscule doses to poison me. Her plan was diabolical. She would turn my own gaslighting tactics into reality. She would make everyone, including Michael, believe that I was old, senile, paranoid, and perhaps the one who was truly a danger to the family. If she succeeded, my words would carry no weight. She could easily frame me for poisoning my son out of a desire to control the family fortune, and she'd get everything she wanted, her debts cleared. I felt a wave of cold dread wash over me. The wolf was no longer hiding in the shadows. It was baring its teeth right in front of me. My original plan was in ruins. Amber had turned the tables. Now I not only had to prove her crime, but I also had to fight to protect my own sanity in the eyes of everyone else. "You have to stop, Mom," Michael said to me, his voice filled with worry after I told him about my symptoms. "She's poisoning you. This is too dangerous. We need to call the police now." "No," I replied, my voice firm. "If we call the police now, she'll deny everything. She'll say I'm making it up, that I'm senile and I despise her. We have to see this through to the end, but we're changing the plan." The final trap couldn't be a legal document anymore. It had to be a stage, a theater where Amber would walk right into her own downfall while thinking she was the one taking a bow. I pretended to fall for Amber's act. I began to play the part of a dotty old woman. I'd intentionally forget the housekeeper's name, misplace documents, and complain about my headaches in front of both Michael and Amber. I saw the triumphant glint in Amber's eyes and the growing worry in my son's. That was the hardest part, seeing my own child suffer because he was worried about me. The final piece of bait was still the Hayes Family Medical Trust, but this time its purpose was different. I called a meeting at the lawyer's office, but it wasn't just the three of us. I invited Walter and a respected psychologist, whom I introduced as our family counselor. "Because my health has been failing lately," I said at the meeting, my voice weak, "I want to expedite the creation of the trust. But I want Amber to be the sole trustee. I'm just not clear-headed enough anymore." Michael played his part, protesting. "Mom, what are you talking about? You're perfectly fine." "No, son," I interrupted, looking at Amber. "I trust Amber. She will take good care of our family." That was everything Amber wanted to hear. She had won. She had succeeded in neutralizing me. She smiled, a look that was both humble and bursting with triumph, and said, "I won't let you down, Mother." Our lawyer, Mr. Thompson, placed the documents on the table. "Then we shall sign." But before Amber could pick up the pen, I said, my voice trembling, "Wait, before we sign, I need to confess something that has been tormenting me." All eyes turned to me. I looked at Michael, then at Amber, my eyes welling up with tears. "It was me," I sobbed, my voice breaking. "I was the one who put a strange powder in Michael's food." The room fell silent. Michael shot up, stunned, playing the role of the shocked son to perfection. Amber froze, a look of utter confusion on her face, but mixed in was a flicker of victory she tried to hide. I had said, "a strange powder," a vague phrase that could mean anything. "I just wanted him to get a little sick," I continued, weeping, "so he would realize how important his health is, so he would work less. I bought it online. They said it was just a strong herbal supplement, but I never imagined it would go this far. The vial, I still have it right here." My hands shaking, I opened my purse, took out the real vial of arsenic that Michael had switched, and placed it on the table. This was the moment Amber had been waiting for. This was her golden opportunity to finish me, to claim her victory. She couldn't resist. "You see?" she shrieked, jumping to her feet and pointing at me, her voice a mix of vindication and glee. "I told Michael, she's lost her mind. She's the one who hurt her own son." She turned to the two police detectives who had been positioned in the corner as legal aides. "Did you hear that? She confessed." And then she delivered the final, fatal blow to herself. She admitted to putting arsenic in Michael's food. That vial on the table is arsenic. She's paranoid and jealous of her daughter-in-law. Arrest her. Click. The trap was sprung. Silence consumed the room. Amber was still breathing heavily from her emotional accusation, still drunk on her supposed victory. She failed to realize that no one in that room, not even me in my confession, had ever uttered the word arsenic. Only the true culprit would know the name of the weapon. And then I lifted my head. The tears were gone. The frail, confused demeanor vanished, replaced by an ice-cold gaze and a faint, pitying smile. "Thank you, Amber," I said, my voice now strong and clear. "Thank you for confirming the name of the poison for us. I only said it was a strange powder, but you knew very well it was arsenic." I turned to Amber, whose face was now ashen white, her eyes wide with horror as she realized her fatal mistake. "You thought you were so clever, didn't you, Amber, when you tested Michael with the soup, when you started poisoning me? You thought you were pulling all the strings." I signaled to Mr. Thompson. He switched on the large monitor on the wall. The first video appeared, Michael swapping the vials in the bedroom. The second, Amber sneaking into my office, caught on a security camera. And the final, clearest clip from a micro camera hidden in the kitchen. Amber, just 2 nights ago, carefully sprinkling powder from the poison vial into the herbal tea she made for me every evening. "The vial you see on this table," I said, my voice cold, "is the one Michael took from your room. The powder from my teapot last night is a perfect match. And your gleeful accusation, complete with the exact name of the poison you just shouted, has been fully recorded." Amber's expression shifted from confusion to horror, and finally to despair. She looked around the room, at Michael, at Walter, at the psychologist, at the police officers. She realized they were all part of the play. She wasn't the director. She was the only puppet who didn't know she was on a string. She didn't scream. She didn't collapse. The wolf, cornered at last, simply fell silent. She sank into her chair, her eyes empty. The chess match was over. Checkmate. When they handcuffed Amber and led her away, she didn't look at me. She looked at Michael one last time, with a look not of remorse, but of the bitter sting of a defeated player. After they left, the room was oppressively quiet. I sat there, looking out the window at the gray Charles River. I had won, but the victory tasted bitter. I had to sacrifice my own peace, feign madness, and push my son through a brutal psychological war. Michael came to my side and put his hand on my shoulder. "We did it, Mom." I nodded, squeezing his hand. We did it. Looking at the roses trembling in the wind outside, I knew some scars would never fully heal. The scar on Michael's trust. The scar on my memory of a family that once seemed so perfect. But just like those roses, we would survive the winter. Because that, right there, is life. It's never perfect, but it goes on.